was a quiet night in 1991 when 4-year-old Angela Murphy was tucked into bed by her mother like every other evening. Nothing seemed unusual. Her bedtime story was read, her favorite plush bunny was by her side, and the hallway nightlight glowed softly outside her room. Her parents went to bed believing their daughter was safe in her room. But by morning, everything changed. Angela's bed was empty. Her blanket was folded back neatly, as if she had simply gotten up and walked away. The windows were locked. The front door was shut tight. No signs of forced entry. No noise had been heard during the night. It was as if Angela had vanished into thin air. Panic swept through the house. Police were called immediately, and a full-scale investigation began. But days turned into weeks, then months, with no clues, no suspects, and no sign of little Angela. The case went cold. The disappearance of Angela Murphy shocked the small town. Flyers with her face were posted on every lamppost, her photo broadcast on the evening news. Volunteers scoured the woods, rivers, and abandoned buildings within miles of her home. But nothing, no footprints, no clothing, not even a single trace, ever turned up. Her parents, Laura and Tom, were questioned extensively. Police considered every possibility: kidnapping, a runaway child, even a carefully hidden family secret. But no evidence supported any theory. Angela had simply vanished from her bed, without noise, without struggle, and without explanation. By the end of that year, the case was officially classified as unsolved. Detectives moved on to other cases. Angela's room was left untouched, frozen in time, exactly the way it was that night in 1991. Her mother, however, never stopped believing that Angela was still out there, somewhere. Years passed, but Angela's mother, Laura, refused to give up. Every birthday, she kept a small cake ready. Every Christmas, a gift with Angela's name sat under the tree. The world moved on, but Laura couldn't, not without answers. She kept every one of Angela's belongings exactly where they were. Her clothes stayed in the closet, her shoes lined up under the bed, and her favorite toy, a small stuffed bunny that could record and play back voices, remained on the top shelf of the dresser, untouched for nearly a decade. Tom tried to be supportive, but over the years, the pain took its toll. The couple eventually divorced, unable to carry the weight of grief together. Still, Laura stayed in the house, clinging to the hope that one day something, anything, would bring her daughter back. Then, in the 9th year after Angela's disappearance, Laura decided to clean her daughter's room for the first time. What she found would change everything. It was a quiet afternoon when Laura finally gathered the strength to enter Angela's room with the intention of packing things away. As she dusted the shelves and folded tiny clothes, her hands trembled. But then she spotted it, Angela's old recording toy, the stuffed bunny with a voice playback feature. On impulse, Laura pressed the worn button on the toy's chest. A bit of static crackled, and then a small voice played. "Hi, Mommy. It's me. Angela. He says I can't talk, but I'm scared. I don't know where I am." Laura froze. The voice was unmistakably Angela's, frightened, whispering, and clearly not recorded at home. Her knees buckled as she replayed it, again and again, her heart racing. The toy had somehow held a forgotten message, one that was never heard until now. A voice not just from her daughter, but possibly a clue to what had happened to her. Laura rushed the toy to the local police station, nearly breathless with emotion. The officers were skeptical at first. Nearly a decade had passed since Angela's disappearance. But once they heard the recording, the mood shifted instantly. Forensic audio specialists were brought in to examine the stuffed bunny. The recording was old and degraded, but it was real. And more than just Angela's voice, they detected something else: a faint background noise. After enhancing the audio, it became clear. A distinct sound, like the screech of metal against metal, followed by a low humming. The sound wasn't from their home. In fact, it sounded industrial, possibly a generator or machinery running nearby. Investigators combed through local maps and utility records from 1991, cross-referencing areas where such equipment had operated during that time. Then they found something: an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. one that had been in use by a private contractor in the early 90s and was shut down just months after Angela disappeared. It had never been searched. The next morning, investigators and forensic teams made their way to the abandoned warehouse. It stood alone on a desolate stretch of land, surrounded by rusted fencing and overgrown weeds. The building had been closed for nearly a decade, forgotten by most, but now it was the center of renewed hope and growing dread. Inside, the air was thick with dust. Broken glass crunched under their boots as they swept room by room. Most of the warehouse was empty, filled only with decaying equipment and old storage crates. But then, toward the back of the building, they found something odd. A small locked door set into the concrete wall. Using bolt cutters, they forced it open, and behind it was a narrow stairway leading underground. What they found below would stop them in their tracks. The stairwell was cold and damp, descending into darkness beneath the warehouse. Investigators moved cautiously, their flashlights cutting through the stale air. At the bottom, they entered a narrow corridor lined with rusted pipes and peeling paint. It didn't look like part of any official structure, more like something added in secret. Then they saw it, a single windowless room with a heavy metal door. Inside was a small space barely large enough for a bed, a chair, and a light bulb hanging from the ceiling. On the wall, faint crayon drawings still clung to the concrete. One showed a house. Another showed what looked like a girl, smiling, but behind bars. On the floor lay an old, tattered blanket, a child's cup, and a plastic bracelet, the kind Angela wore when she was 4. The room had clearly been used to keep someone there, hidden, alone, and forgotten. But there was no sign of Angela. Though Angela was nowhere to be found, the underground room was undeniable proof. Someone had kept her there. Forensic teams began collecting samples, including hair strands, fingerprints, and even the faded crayon drawings. Meanwhile, detectives dug into the warehouse's history, searching for anyone connected to the building back in 1991. One name came up repeatedly: Robert Elmer, a former maintenance contractor who had rented the space during the exact period Angela went missing. At the time, he was briefly investigated but cleared due to lack of evidence. He had since moved states away, living a quiet, seemingly uneventful life. But now, with new forensic technology and the discovery of the hidden room, interest in Robert reignited. Investigators obtained a warrant and searched his old property, and what they found would shift the case in a terrifying new direction. At Robert Elmer's former residence, now owned by another family, investigators searched the basement and garage. Hidden behind a loose panel in the wall, they uncovered a sealed box of personal items left behind during his sudden move years earlier. Inside were faded photographs, receipts, and handwritten notes. But buried at the bottom was something that made their blood run cold: a small cassette tape labeled AM Day 17. It was a voice recording. When they played it, the room fell silent. Angela's voice came through again, timid and trembling. "Please, I want to go home now. I was good today, please." The date on the label confirmed it. Angela had been held captive for at least 17 days after her disappearance. This wasn't just evidence, it was confirmation. Robert had taken her, but where had she gone after that? And why had he never been caught? The team now had a suspect, a location, and proof of captivity. But one question still haunted everyone. Was Angela still alive? The investigation and a manhunt for Robert Elmer was launched, but it turned out he had died 3 years earlier from natural causes. He took many secrets to his grave. Still, authorities pressed on, determined to trace every detail of his past. They discovered that shortly after the warehouse was shut down, Robert had moved across state lines and worked briefly as a groundskeeper at a private institution, a now defunct psychiatric facility. When they accessed archived records from the facility, something stood out. A patient admitted under a false name, with no family history, no documentation, and strange behavior. She had arrived shortly after Angela's disappearance and left the system completely when the facility closed. The girl had no memory of her childhood, No one had ever matched her identity. Authorities tracked her down, and a DNA test was ordered. What came next would leave everyone speechless. The DNA test results arrived quietly, but with monumental impact. The woman in question was indeed Angela Murphy. After nearly a decade of silence, she was alive, though her memories were fragmented and confused. The young woman had no recollection of her family or her early childhood. Her time in captivity and later in the psychiatric facility had erased much of her past. But slowly, with therapy and support, fragments began to return. Visions of the warehouse, the underground room, and the frightened little girl she once was. Reunited with her mother Laura, Angela faced a challenging road ahead, one of healing, rediscovery, and piecing together the lost years. Though the mystery of her disappearance was finally solved, the scars remained deep. Angela's return brought overwhelming relief to her mother and the entire community. Though the years of separation and trauma left deep wounds, Angela's survival was a beacon of hope. With the help of counselors, family, and friends, she began the slow process of rebuilding her life. Laura and Angela worked to reclaim lost time, sharing stories, laughter, and tears. The mystery that had haunted the town for so long was finally laid to rest, but the message remained clear. Even in the darkest times, hope can survive. Angela's story became a reminder to never stop searching, never stop believing, and never give up on those we love. With the discovery of the cassette tape, the case exploded back into public view. The FBI joined,